Happy, beautiful day. It's Pete Cohen, and welcome to the My 365 podcast. This is, without doubt, a very special podcast. Why? Well, maybe the title will give it away. What is the title of this podcast? Are you ready? Covid-19, the ultimate opportunity for reinvention. Your guide to growth in challenging times. Get ready for a game-changing podcast. Happy, beautiful day, guys and girls. Pete Cohen in the house. This is a podcast that I think will hit home for a few people because I think it's time, right? It's time for us to wake up. And when I call a podcast COVID-19, the ultimate opportunity for reinvention, your guide to growth in challenging times, I am not mucking about here. I'm talking about this stuff because it's real. The whole world has changed. I mean, who would have believed that a few months ago, let's say November last year, if you'd mentioned COVID-19, no one would know what you were talking about. But boy, has the world changed. What started in December in China, where people were dying, and it really, a lot of doctors were just unsure what this pneumonia was, and then people got more and more concerned, and then before you know it, it is spread. It's spread across the world, and there's probably never been a time where there are more people who are more aware of something, and so many people's lives have been affected by a virus. And I really wanted to make this podcast this morning after basically reading a story that someone had sent me about bees. You've probably heard about bees, that they've been around for millions of years. They're incredible creatures who basically do no harm. They're not cynical. They're not hysterical animals. They just basically go out. They do what they do. They create something amazing. And that's what they've done for millions of years. And their life is under threat because of how other creatures on Earth, namely human beings, have been going about their daily life. How the world is in a place right now, and it has been for some time, where we've been hearing about epidemics, we've been hearing about the environment, we've been hearing about how we're living and how that's affecting our lives. And then all of a sudden, something happens where everybody just has to stop. And what's really interesting for me, someone whose background is in psychology, is how a time of crisis really puts people into a position where they behave in ways that they wouldn't normally behave. And this podcast actually is really aimed, I think you could put people into three categories when things like this happen. People who just basically retreat, get into a state of hysteria and fear and worry, and some of that for good reason, I'm sure. And then you get people who are just passive and just think, well, you know what, let's just kind of see what happens. And then you get people who are like, wow, this is, I really need to rise up. I really need to help. I really need to seize the day. I really need to make the most of what is actually going on. And if you're one of those people, then I'd really encourage you. If you're one of those people that's quite passive, you might find what I'm about to say intriguing. You might find it helpful to make you stop being so passive and maybe start really seizing the day and seizing the opportunity that exists for all of us to reinvent. I think that there has never been a time in our lives where we have this opportunity to really rethink, reevaluate, reshape, remold, reposition, reformat, reset what we're doing. Because I think the way we were doing things before COVID-19 was really interesting, right? I mean, if you were to stop last year and ask yourself a few questions, you know, how do you feel about your life right now? What's working? What's not working? Most people would say that they felt under pressure. Most people felt that life wasn't the way that they necessarily wanted it to be, maybe felt compromised in some way, but maybe feeling that there was nothing they could do about it. One of the things I did a number of years ago is I moved out of London. London is the place I've grown up in, but over the years, it's definitely changed. It's definitely busier. I'd say it was more aggressive. It was less friendly. People have got just less time. There's a pace. You see people traveling to work. You see so many people who just look unhappy. You look at people who look compromised because they know they're not being who they're really capable of being. And my life's work is really about one thing. I want to help people live life by design. I want people to be the best they can be mentally, physically, emotionally. I want people to be just to enjoy life rather than feeling that they are out of control. And I don't know whether this resonates with you, but I'm asking you, what was going on prior to this situation that maybe you weren't happy about? What was wrong? What was missing? What was your current circumstances like? When I work with people, I'm interested in 3 areas. I'm interested in their health and their energy. I'm interested in their relationships, and I'm interested in their work and their service, and helping people make strides in any of those 3 areas. Because I know that if you could wave a magic wand, that's what most people would want. They'd want to have the ultimate currency, which isn't necessarily money. Money's great. I know that's under threat for a lot of people, but I think the ultimate currency is energy. When you don't have energy, you don't have health, which makes life very, very difficult. And it's interesting, isn't it? The amount of people that have got COVID-19 or died because their health was compromised. And, maybe that will be part of the reinvention or the wake-up call, that many people will start to think, what? I don't want to be someone who falls ill when I don't need to. I want to have a stronger immune system. But then if we're going to look at that, then you're going to think, well, actually, I'm going to have to do something because, that we live in a world where basically if we get sick, especially in the Western world, well, just go to the doctor and he'll give you something to stop you from being sick. He won't make you well because he doesn't know how to make you well. And maybe you want to be well. Maybe now you want to, but there is a price for that. And when we talk about the ultimate opportunity for reinvention, if you really want to experience health and energy like never before, you're going to have to start doing things in a different way. And maybe that's what will happen on the back of COVID-19. I mean, look, what we've been seeing all over the world is pretty amazing, right? In terms of people going outside their house and clapping for the National Health Service, or people in Italy singing on their balconies, or you look at satellite images of China and you see that there's no smog, that the pollution is almost completely gone. And we see, wow, this is absolutely incredible. And it's so sad in some respects that it's taken death and this horrible thing that is swept around the world to make many people wake up and ask fundamental questions like, what is life really all about? What is really important? And I think many people right now are waking up to what's really important. And are you not one of those people that's starting to think about, your relationships? And today, in fact, what's interesting is, today, the 12th of May, 2 years ago, my father died, and tomorrow is my 50th birthday party. I'm not having a party, but it's my 50th birthday, and I can't be with my mum, right? And it's crazy that this has happened, but it is what it is. And my point, what I'm trying to make to you is, what do you want the legacy of this situation to be? See, what I was seeing before this happened was a world that has gone mad. 50% of Americans with a chronic health condition, 800,000 people every year taking their own lives. The world was moving in a particular way that wasn't healthy, wasn't kosher, wasn't nourishing. And I think this is the biggest wake-up call that most of us will ever have. An opportunity to reevaluate and just look at the world with a fresh pair of eyes. Now, ultimately, what's going to be really interesting is what happens on the back of this. What happens? Because what tends to happen is when disasters strike, many people rise up and they behave in a way that they wouldn't normally behave. And I love to see human beings do things they wouldn't normally do, because that's the strength that we have. That when disaster strikes, I remember living in Ladbroke Grove by the Grenville Towers, and when that fire happened in the block of flats, I mean, it was terrible, but there were people there that didn't talk to each other before that happened. And then it happened, and we saw a side of people we just wouldn't normally see. People become heroic. People become better versions of themselves. People get out of their own way. People don't, in those situations, it's not a question of how they feel that brings about a necessity to act. The necessity to act is there to do the right thing. But what happens after a disaster is we go back to how we were before. I don't know about you. I don't want to go back to how things were before. Do you? Now, you might not think you have any control over that, but ultimately, what do you have control over? Abraham Maslow is someone who I talk about a lot. He says what man can be, he must be. That we look at the hierarchy of needs. What do you need? You need safety, you need food, you need shelter, you need a sense of communities, of belonging. And then above that, you need this, what he called self-actualizing, to be what you're capable of being. And most of us know that we're not doing that. And we're just settling. And when we're settling, there's a part of us that is dying. And then a disaster comes, and all of a sudden we behave in ways we wouldn't normally behave. And we appreciate people. We change our life. We reevaluate. But then once we get comfortable again, we go back to what is familiar to us. I don't know about you. I don't want that. What do you want the legacy? Because the legacy of COVID-19. Because one day we'll all look back and say, do you remember COVID-19? That was the best thing that ever happened to me. Why? Well, I don't know. It could be the best thing that ever happened to you because of the direction that you choose to take your life in. One of the people I quote a lot is James Stockdale, who was a prisoner in the Vietnam War. And, he talks about this thing about hope, knowing that your future is better than your past. And his story is just incredible. Stories change life. We love stories. And maybe we're all going to make an incredible story on the back of COVID-19, or maybe we won't. Maybe it'll be the worst thing that ever happens to you, that you lose loved ones, that you lose your job and you just lose and you end up feeling like a loser and you don't take your life in any of a different direction to where it is right now. But what could be the breaking of you could be the making of you. And Stockdale, what he said is that death is not the end. And when I read that, I thought, what does he mean? Death is not the end. It is. He said, well, no, it's not the end because life carries on after you. It does, right? I mean, life carries on after you. And I don't know about you, but I think we live in a world, especially where I live here in the UK, we're pretty privileged, right? There's never been anything like this before. There was the crisis in 2008 and there's been other things that have happened, but nothing like this. I don't live in a country like Uganda or somewhere where, Iran or Syria, where there's been crap going on for so long and no one's really been that bothered. I mean, some people are, because most people are just suffering inside their own head and suffering often when they don't need to, rather than rising up and going, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to become. And this is one of the main points I really want to talk about, because when I'm talking about the ultimate opportunity for reinvention, you can see that, right? You must be able to see there's this opportunity. There is an opportunity right here. I mean, there's always an opportunity. There's only one thing that exists in the universe, right? And that is possibility. How many possibilities are there right now? It's just a question of how active you want to be in the way that the world is moving. The world is going to change. And I think we've all been under the illusion that we are in control of the world that we're in. And really, we are not in control. We are in control of certain things, but certain things we're not. And we now realize how fragile this world is, but it's still your world and you still have some choices. See, my goal has always been about taking life from a life of chance to a life of choice, a choice that leads to designing, that then leads to creating, that then leads to manifesting, because that is what you're here to do. You are here to grow. You're here to evolve. That's why we're all here. We evolve, right? And then we die. But what we do in that space, it's weird though, isn't it? Because while we're evolving, we're actually dying at the same time, because every day we're moving closer towards our death, but we still have the opportunity to grow, and we still have the opportunity to leave an impact. We still have an opportunity to be like bees, bees who want to make the world better so that their next generation can keep living, to evolve. What do you want the legacy of COVID-19 to be? What was compromised in your life? When I was a child, I loved zombie films. I didn't know at the time, but I think I know now that I think there are just zombies everywhere. People that have just literally almost given up. But when I say give up, they're just trying to survive, and rather than striving and thriving. And the biggest issue in the world before COVID-19, what I could see, was people that were just settling for what they have, settling for a life of comfort rather than being a hunter and a gatherer. Now, hunting might sound like a strong word that might conjure up God knows what, but we were designed to hunt and gather. And then when we evolved, we found a way that where we weren't threatened, where we became the king of the jungles, to basically, when we weren't being chased by saber-toothed tigers, where we could kill the saber-toothed tiger, that we then found a way to settle. We could relax, we could drink wine, we could grow crops, we could just eat and drink and be merry and be rich and make other people work for us. Or maybe you weren't one of those people, you were one of the poor who was working for the rich. And this is just kind of how the world was. But even 2,500 years ago, people were aware of the issues around settling. That if you gave into a life of settling, you gave into a life of probably vice and just not being your best self, because we need to grow, we need to evolve. The Greeks called us teleological. What do you need to do? What must you do? Still, for most people, it's one of three things or three areas. They must be healthy. They must have energy, but there's a price for that. You can just say, no, I'll do it tomorrow. And your health will get compromised. And maybe you'll die before your time and end up on taking loads of drugs that you don't need to take just to keep you alive rather than being alive. And the same with your relationships, that you have the opportunity to have better relationships with the people around you. You have the opportunity to have a life of service. You have an opportunity to find something you really love to do and to do it. And maybe COVID-19 is really waking you up and making you think, you know what is it I need to do? What is it I need to become? What is it I need to let go of? Because this is a crisis. But what does that word actually mean? You should Google it. It's fascinating. The word crisis actually means turning point. And in Japan, it has two meanings, two symbols: opportunity and danger. Opportunity and danger. Often where there is danger, there is opportunity. Recently, I've been working with a whole load of fitness business owners and actually also hairdressers, salon owners who have also been forced into a position where they're not able to do what they were doing before. Their livelihood has been taken away, but some of them have found a way to pivot, which is crazy, right? Pivoting when you're a hairdresser, because that's one thing I don't think you can do remotely, right? Or maybe you could guide someone how to cut their hair. But it's amazing to see how many people have shifted and twisted and found a way to pivot. Who was it that said, was it Darwin that said, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, it's the ones who are most responsive to change. And how responsive will you be to this change? I see this as the most incredible opportunity for us to reinvent, for us to take decisive action. But this must be the legacy. I really, really encourage you to think about this, because the danger is you will reinvent, but only until you get comfortable, only until it gets easy, until there's that opportunity to settle. And it's not necessarily the strongest or the ones who are more responsive to change. I think it's the ones who are more responsive to something they want to create in front of them, something they can see. The greatest achievement of any human being, right, is something you can see and something you manifest through your daily action, through your daily operation, bringing something into existence. Does this make sense to you? I've actually made some notes here this morning. This morning, I just basically got up really early and just was like, God, there's so many things that just kind of need to be said right now, because the world is in turmoil. And what I have seen in working with people for so long is basically everyone needs help. I'm only here today because people helped me. My dad 2 years ago today, who passed away, he's not here anymore, but boy, did he help me. Boy, did he have an impact on my life. In fact, at his funeral, it was amazing to see all the people that were there were so packed, people couldn't get in. They had to watch on a TV outside. He impacted the world. He impacted people's lives. My dad was born during the Second World War. My dad was a fanatic of actually the First World War. The First World War was a battle where people were just in situations that, can you imagine being in a trench with just crap all around you, not actually knowing how far away your enemy was? Maybe you got shot and taken to a hospital, but you just had to get back. You would crawl back because you needed to be with your comrades. You needed to be with your friends, because that is when you felt most alive. And my point here is that with my dad, so many people wrote my mum letters, emails, physical letters, and they all said the same thing, that my dad had time for everyone. My dad made everyone feel important. And that's what I want to do. Part of his legacy that he gave me is to do the same thing for you. So wherever you're listening to this right now, maybe you're feeling like, my God, Pete Cohen is actually talking to me. Pete Cohen actually cares for me. Pete Cohen's talking about me and reinventing my life. How do I reinvent my life? Understand that you're here to do one thing. You're here to grow. You're here to get better. What do you need to do? It's so interesting with all the conversations I have, with all of the coaching calls that I do with people. It's fascinating just to see this same issue with so many people. It's this battle within themselves, a part of them that wants them to settle and think, you know what, I just want to stay here because you know what, it's comfortable. And another part that's going, I just want to move forwards. I just want to grow. I want to make a difference. I want to be healthy. I want to be a better human being. And this battle that goes on, and all of a sudden, when disaster strikes, the part that wants us to stay where we are, in many cases, just disappears because the necessity to act comes through. The real human being, the real you comes through. And that's what I see. And that's what I'm fascinated about. And I'm more determined than ever. And if you're one of those people right here, right now, that is someone that is wanting to make things better, if you want to be better, if you want to be the hero in your own life, then you and I need to talk. We need to talk. We need to get on the phone, and we need to have a conversation about how you're going to make that happen. Because the likelihood of you doing that on your own, I'd say, is pretty much zero. Human beings are awful at surviving on their own. They can do it for a bit, but they thrive when you get help and support of other people. And that's why you're seeing people right now. You know, just think about it. What will the legacy be? You know, I've been saying this, and I don't mean to be nasty, but I say, what's the point of clapping for the National Health Service? It's really nice, but what is going to happen as a result of that? Maybe it will be that people will say, you know what? The best thing I can do for the National Health Service is not get sick. So I will not smoke. I will not drink that extra glass of wine. I will not eat that crap food. I won't do that. I will exercise because I don't want to go there. I don't want to put a strain on the National Health Service. But then all of a sudden, you're putting the spotlight on yourself. And most people don't want to look at themselves. They want to look at the world outside of themselves and complain and blame and look what other people are doing, rather than what are you doing? What are you doing for yourself? What are you doing for humanity? You know, what you can be, you must be. What must you be? Well, that's up to you. And maybe it's time to really think about that. So if there's anything that you take away from this podcast, well, you're probably going to hear that I'm quite passionate about this, right? We need to be inspired, not just to act, to move away from this virus, but we need to think way beyond that. This is my main point. If you take one thing away from this ramble of words, I want you to think about, what must you create? What must you go after? Look, the natural state of the garden is decay. The natural state. That's what the garden does, right? We have to go out there and work the garden. But if you have a vision of what that garden will look like when you finish gardening, what do you think is going to happen? You might be inspired to keep going even when it's difficult, even when it's raining, even when you don't feel like it. Because there is a disease in the world right now that many of you that listen to this podcast have heard me talk about before. It's called excuse-itis. Excuse me, I'm going to stay where I am. Excuse me, I'm not going to do that. I'll do it tomorrow. And you never do it because there's a part of you that's settling. What do you want the legacy of COVID to be? How can I help you? That's one of my goals. I want to build a global revolution of 10 million people around the world that want to live life not by chance. I'll just see what happens. We'll see. No, live by choice. Choices where you design and you create and you make your world a better place. The odds are stacked against you, right? But they don't have to be. They don't have to be. Let's stop making excuses and excuse ourselves to come through like never before and show the world what we're capable of. What will be your legacy? I've said many things here. My key points, really, it's time for us to be inspired to move through this, but move beyond it because there's something that we can see in front of us. Maybe we need to practice seeing that. Maybe we need to talk to someone. We need to go from being victims and just settling for what we have. I'm not saying we shouldn't enjoy what we have. In fact, my coach used to say to me, happiness is wanting what you have. So knowing that you have everything that you need, but knowing that there's more that you can create, not necessarily accumulating things to impress the people that you don't even like. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but the world needs us to serve. The world needs us to help others. The era of the go-getter has gone. Napoleon Hill wrote about that in 1937. And I'm not sure if that message has really got home yet, but let's make the message come home, right? Let's serve. Let's go and make the world a better place. Who can we help? Well, first of all, we could help ourselves by deciding the person that we want to become with our health and our energy, our relationships, our work, our service, and go out there and fight for it. Fight for it and make it happen. What do you reckon? What do you reckon? Are you ready to become the hero that you were born to be? Are you? Or are you just going to be a hero in the beginning like so many people? They recognized that 2,500 years ago. Can you believe it? I was speaking to a futurist. I didn't even know what a futurist was until not long ago. But basically, they're people that look at the past and look at what happened. And he said that the virus was a message from the future. You know, that humans have been cultivating a world that is too dense. It's too fast. It's overheating. And now it's giving us a message. The world is giving us a message to say, hey, you can reinvent yourself. You can reinvent yourself if you want to. You don't have to, because there'll probably never be an opportunity like this where we've all had the opportunity to slow down, but slowly it's starting to speed up again. Can you feel it? But we don't have to speed up. We can decide who we want to become. A great life does not happen by chance. It happens by design. What are you going to design? What's the legacy from this? How can I help you? Feel free to reach out to me. We can get on a call. No joke. I speak to lots of people who listen to this podcast. We have conversations. Go to coaching.petecohen.com, coaching.petecohen.com, and watch the video that is on there, because it's on there for one reason, to give you some practical advice about closing the gap between where you are and where you want to be. There is a gap in this world right now, and we can fill that gap and make the world a better place. You know, we can do it. We can do it. It's been done before, right? What Band-Aid did all those years ago. Feed the world. But what happened after a bit, people forget. It's time for us to dream bigger, dream of something better, and go after it like never before. Thank you so much for listening to this today. I really appreciate it. And let's work together and do what we need to do. Not now, but right now. Happy, beautiful day. Thanks for listening. And if you want to go from living a life by chance to an extraordinary life by design, so you have the health, wealth, and abundance that you're looking for, then make sure you join our Facebook group, My365 Kickstart, for additional tools, tips, techniques, and inspiration to help you go from where you are to where you want to be. Take care, and thanks for listening.